From wearing 40 grand on his wrist to owning a 5-star private jet, Lewis Hamilton sure knows how to live a life of luxury. I mean, his net worth of $285 million has to go somewhere, right? Like, just look at the places he lives in. And it's not surprising when a celebrity has a few houses to their names. But the Briton sure knows how to outdo himself in this field as well. Because for starters, he's got a whopping $24 million mansion sitting there in West London with 6 bedrooms, 4 reception rooms, and 2 huge bathrooms. And it's still unknown how much time Hamilton even spends at this place. Like, geez, what more space would you want? Because with this other New York penthouse he has, the London estate just looks like a cabin. The New York one is well over $43 million.
You can let down a lot of people.
We're all there to do the best job possible.
At the end of seasons, you think, and the question is whether you're willing to commit the time and the effort that it takes to be a world champion. I think a lot of people underestimate what it takes to be a world champion. And there are so many moving parts. It's not just turning up and driving the car. So yeah, the question is, do you want to sacrifice the time? Do you believe that you can continue to punch at the weight that you're punching?
You're constantly having to battle those demons. But the great thing is you can always overcome them.
And with that kind of price, Hamilton sure invested in a lot of amenities because, you know, he's got his own swimming pool, a fitness center, a squash court, and probably the best of all, a real-life HD view of the Hudson River right from his bedroom window. Like, that's something straight out of the movies. But then again, it's the richest F1 driver we're talking about. The man can afford a place anywhere, just like how he's got a Monte Carlo retreat waiting for him. And maybe it's the Monaco vibes or the fact that he gets to live there tax-free. But for him, it's his home. A home that just cost around $37 million, of course. But really, that's nothing for a Formula One driver. And it's natural how these drivers turn out to be huge motorheads. Like, just ask Hamilton for the number of cars he's got in his collection, and let me tell you that he'll run out of fingers to count them on. Because he's got Ferraris, Mercedes, 2 Paganis in his garage. And that in itself is worth looking at. Like, he spent around $2 million on his Pagani Zonda 760 LH, but he sold it off pretty quick because he wasn't happy with his handling. And to replace that beauty, he brought in his exclusive edition of the Mercedes Project One. This was not only because he drives for their F1 team, but this car had sustainable fuels and powertrains that Hamilton just couldn't resist. But that's not the only Mercedes he's got, because there are a bunch of others waiting to go out for a ride. Like, he's got the AMG SLS Black, the Mercedes Maybach S600, as well as a white AMG GTR, which is probably the most normal car he owns. I mean, that explains why he needs such huge mansions with garages. Because with these cars and his Shelby Cobra, Ford Mustang, and McLaren P1, he also owns an electric Maverick X3 dune buggy. This makes me question, how many cars does one person need? And all of that is estimated to be around $16 million only, which is like pocket change for the Briton. And if driving on road gets boring for him, Hamilton sure knows how to kill time in his private jet. I mean, he has to zoom across the planet every other week to get to his race. So instead of joining business class of the greatest airlines, this man decided to get his own plane. That's right, he owned a Bombardier Challenger 605 private jet, and it was an absolute beauty. An elegant Bordeaux color with facilities you'd only get in a 5-star hotel. But to reduce his carbon footprint, Hamilton decided to sell the jet at a modest price of $8.95 million, which is something that would make all finance people lose their minds because he splashed $23 million on that jet. I mean, talk about losing millions rather than spending them. But honestly, Hamilton doesn't seem to care much about that. In fact, he's more concerned about what he wears to the paddock. Now, there's no doubt that this 38-year-old is the most fashionable driver on the grid, because while everyone else would be wearing their team merch, walking with clipboards and all, this guy would be walking down the paddock as if it's some sort of runway. It's like he's one step away to bring the Met Gala into the stadium, and he knows he'll be photographed, so he shows up all prim and proper, not a button out of place, and easily becomes a supermodel. And that's primarily why he's the brand ambassador of Tommy Hilfiger.
The most recent trip that I did was to the continent of Africa. That was definitely life-changing an experience. I mean, I went to Rwanda. We hiked up in to see the gorillas and living in the most peaceful, natural environment that they belong in.
Not just that, but he cracked a deal with a fashion designer that is worth over $1 billion. So if his fashion wasn't enough, he might just take it to the next level with what's coming. Like, he can comfortably spend anywhere between $4,000 to $98,000 on fashion wear. Just like how he did it in the French Grand Prix in 2022, where his outfit was nearly $100,000. So imagine what that billion-dollar contract might bring him. But with the current deal he has with the International Watch Company, Hamilton has spent millions on watches as well. Now, the champ can only wear IWC, so if he wants anything exclusive for himself, he's got the money to make it happen. Like, just look at the elegant all-black timepiece he got for Black Lives Matter, and that shows he's going to wear whatever he stands for. And for that, the entire community has major respect for him. But if we're talking about watches, then Hamilton has got an incredible eye for beautiful timepieces. Like, just look at his trusty IWC Big Pilot's Perpetual Calendar Edition. Yeah, it's around 35 grand, but have you seen it? It makes sense as to why it's his favorite watch in his collection. It's nothing like what the world is used to. And possibly, it's a little memo of the private jet he had, because they've got a similar color scheme. But despite losing the jet, the Briton never shied away from a trip around the world, because his backpacking tours just shows how rich the lad is. Right, so he already travels back and forth for his race circuits, so it's surprising to see how he's up for another trip to exotic locations. But that's better than letting dust form on the stacks of bucks he's got, and because of that, Hamilton really goes out of his way to experience everything in life. Like, he's done surfing, he's actively learning how to skydive, and just recently, he took his entire family out on a skiing trip. Like, you name it, if he's not racing, he's doing something that would be just as dangerous. And with the lucrative offers he gets in his job, it won't be surprising to see him participate in even more thrilling adventures in the future. Even right now, he could be spending a lot more on himself, but being a philanthropist, you just can't think entirely about yourself, because this vast fortune is not just for Hamilton alone. He's very generous with what he makes. Now, if you hadn't guessed already, he's actively trying to reduce his carbon footprint, so he spends a lot on environmental and social issues. He donates to numerous charitable causes like education, animal welfare, and mental health. Like when the Australian bushfires rose in 2020, he made sure to donate $500,000 to help the needful. And recently, he gave out around 7% of his earnings to charity, which is over $20 million. And that's pretty heroic, but after all, that's the least he could do after bagging multi-million-dollar deals, right? And that's all from me on all the ways Lewis Hamilton spends his fortune.